Welcome to the Campaign Trend Podcast, where you're joining in on a conversation with the entrepreneurs, operatives, and experts who make professional politics happen. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. On today's episode, I'm joined again by my good friend, Adam Belmar from Advocacy Content Kitchen, who produces the Campaign Trend Podcast. And today we're discussing some of the latest news from the world of tech and politics. We dig into political ad spending on X, the left's exodus, what's going on with TikTok, and more. Hey, Adam, welcome back.
Oh, Eric, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
Always listening, making sure that I sound better than I deserve.
It's great to be back.
So let's start with X. So friend of the pod, Kyle Tharp, reported last week that X pulled in over $25 million from U.S. political advertisers in 2024. So that's a huge jump from the $3 million it made back in 2018 before banning political ads.
And what's incredibly interesting, Eric, is that 60% of those advertisers were on the right and 13% of them on the left. Talk to us about what you make of these numbers and what do they mean for campaigners?
Yeah, so it was a big surprise to me, and just seeing that jump from 2018 that they were able to add that revenue. I think a lot of it had to do with Musk's ownership and making it more of a safe space, if you will, for conservatives. But it was incredibly effective. You know, people aren't just going to pour money into things that don't work, but particularly for direct response. It was really really effective. They were sharing some really good incentives. I remember kind of in the early days of 2024, they were offering some really good deals to advertisers, but clearly it was effective. I'm surprised that the Democrats and the left didn't take more advantage of the performance there, because, you know, from our polling, it's Republicans and Democrats still on X. It's the number tied with number 4 with TikTok to be the most used social media platform by voters. And you were getting a really good return on investment. So I think there is a little bit of the left kind of making a point at their own detriment there.
Well, with everything in the news around X, it seems to have a question mark about how much of a political juggernaut it can be going forward. Am I reading that wrong?
No, it certainly is going to be a place for news and politics, right? Despite all of the hemming and hawing about Elon Musk's ownership and the changes there, changing the name, it is still the go-to place for current events in politics. Reporters particularly haven't really found a new channel to interact with their readers, and it still kind of functions as that assignment editor for political reporters. So what that means is that your political news junkies, those people who are more likely to be donors, volunteers, influencers on campaigns, are still on X. So it's going to continue to be a place for advertisers. And what's really cool is that Musk's team is really committed to finding new ad units, new ways to use the platform. So I think it's going to continue to be a place where campaigns and organizations go to advertise to voters. So I do think Kyle's newsletter, Chaotic Era, so quick plug for that, it's really becoming a must read. And he also wrote about the progressive exodus from X to Blue Sky, and how that impacted those organizations' reach. So the ACLU, for example, had 1.6 million followers on X, but they're only at 72,000 on Blue Sky, the X alternative. Now, people claim that you get more engagement on Blue Sky than you do on X, but that's a huge drop off.
So does that mean that we're kind of seeing the limits of echo chamber social platforms? And what does that mean for campaigners who need to think about how they're going to use this?
Yeah, so it certainly seems that the more fragmented more fragmentation of an audience you get, the more diluted your reach, right? So this is something we've been teaching as a strategy with traditional social media, your Facebook, your Instagram. If you don't want to dilute your reach, well, you really dilute your reach when you go to a bunch of different platforms. I think it's particularly dangerous, and this is something I've said often about other platforms, for a side to say, we're just going to completely write off that audience. We're not going to talk to people on X because we have objections to the ownership, similar to what Republicans have done with TikTok, which we'll dig into a little bit in just a minute. But the key thing here is that uh, you're getting these like smaller and smaller echo chambers, as it seems, where people, okay, if you're the only people I follow or see posts from on Blue Sky are academics, left wing sort of activists, and it seems to be working for them. The takeaway then has to be, what kind of content are we creating? And so I think for campaigners and political organizations, we need to start thinking about the verticals separate from the channels. So if you're doing video, that video needs to work for Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Snapchat, TikTok. If you're doing text, that needs to work for Truth Social, X, Blue Sky, wherever you deem the distribution to be worth the time, rather than the sort of former practice of, you were either like a native content creator on X, or you were a native content creator on Facebook. You've really just got to use all these different platforms as distribution channels. The other really interesting aspect here is that it just shows that the innovation in the social media space is not happening around new features, right? So think back to the early days when Facebook was like, okay, we're going to allow you to tag your friends' photos, right? Like that was a cool new feature. Or we're going to, on X, you can use hashtags to follow along conversations. Now where the innovation seems to be in is, oh, okay, well, your people are over here, your echo chamber is here, and if you don't like seeing controversial right wing opinions, the content moderation on this platform is better over here. Meanwhile, you have platforms like TikTok and Little Red Book innovating on distribution and trends and things like that. It is a really interesting case study in how the market seems to have stagnated.
Well, speaking of TikTok, why don't you give our listeners the latest on the situation there, Eric? Okay, is it banned? It's banned. It's not banned. We're buying it. There's a sovereign wealth. There's a sovereign wealth fund. What does all of this mean for campaigners?
Yeah, it was really crazy, and so I happened to be out of the country during that sort of less than 24-hour period when TikTok was shut down. So I thought, oh, for sure, I'll be able to get on TikTok while everyone else can't. That wasn't the case because I was a US user. My data, per TikTok's commitment to lawmakers, was on a separate set of systems. And so even though I was outside of the country, I was shut off. So it was really interesting that way. But it was down for a little bit. It came back based on the promise of an executive order from President Trump. So that law that passed Congress was signed into law by President Biden and then upheld by the Supreme Court. So it's just like, it's pretty ironclad at that point. But Trump was able to sign that executive order, basically buys TikTok 75 days. So opens the clock on figuring out, is there an adjustment to the law that can be made? Is there a way to find new ownership? Trump wants his sovereign wealth fund to go in and buy it. There are a lot of sort of competing ownership groups who would love to get their hands on TikTok, or we might just not be able to reach a solution, in which case 170 million people are going to, stop getting to use TikTok and have to go find other platforms. So we're kind of back in this wait and see. I think it is too popular of a platform to just go away. The big question mark for me in the space that you and I work in is, well, are we finally going to get on board with TikTok? if it sticks around, and I hope the answer is yes, because it is an important platform, and we understand the security concerns. Those are hopefully going to be addressed by a better ownership structure.
Well, another friend of this podcast, Wesley Donahue, wrote about the GOP's grassroots donor challenge, Eric at thehill.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he said Donald Trump's contributions from small dollar donors have decreased from nearly half of his total in 2020 to less than a third in 2024. And additionally, aggressive fundraising tactics have led to donor fatigue, with many supporters feeling overwhelmed by frequent solicitations. How significant is this decline, Eric, in small donor donations for the Republican Party? And what strategies could be employed by our listeners to address these issues?
So I really think that this is one of the strategic imperatives facing Republicans as we think about a future after Donald Trump. So his nomination and leadership of the party really accelerated this grassroots fervor. People got excited, but we're already starting to see that when it wasn't 2016, when it wasn't 2020, um, there was some decline in that. Fortunately, we have had uh, wealthy supporters, folks like Elon Musk, who are able to come in and fill that gap for Republicans. We can't count on that to be there. So that's why I think it's a strategic imperative. You go one layer down the ballot past the presidential campaign to Senate candidates, and we know for a fact that our Senate candidates on the Republican side of the aisle are just going to get smoked in terms of that hard dollar grassroots donations. And we've talked on a previous episode, as you know, about how important those candidate dollars go because it can buy more TV ads per dollar than a super PAC can.
Absolutely.
So we can't consistently compete in a system where we are behind by this order of magnitude, be it 1.5 to 2.5, 3 times less money than our opponents. So we all have like real alignment on the problem. The challenge is we just don't have good solutions, and that's something I'm going to spend a lot of this year thinking about. One area to consider is maybe we have tapped out on the types of donors who give in this fashion, and we now need to go find another way for finding new donors, and that's going to take a little bit of risk.
And Eric, before we wrap this episode up, we can't talk about tech and not mention AI. What is the latest from your perspective on that front, and how's it impacting campaigners?
Yeah, so this is another space where it's just so difficult to keep up with. So, couple of updates. People may have seen that DeepSeek is a new model that was released by another Chinese startup. So we again have all of the concerns we previously did with TikTok of who's getting the data, who's controlling it. A lot of questions about how they were able to go to market with a model that is competitive with the big tech titans like Microsoft or OpenAI. So that one, it shot up in the App Store as like the number one app. It's not something I'm going to sign up and use just because we still don't know enough about how that data is being used. It's a good reminder that when the product is free, you are the product. But we're also seeing, ChatGPT and OpenAI are just accelerating leaps and bounds. So one of the big releases recently is called Deep Researcher, and it is this is a new AI term that people need to learn. An agent. You'll also hear people talk about agentic artificial intelligence, and so this is from some of the demos that I've seen on X and elsewhere. Human quality research of being able to go out and read journals, read data, basically have access to entire libraries of knowledge and put together really insightful reports. So it combines the autonomy of an agent plus the new reasoning capabilities that we're seeing in some of the latest models. So that's something that's really I've been trying to decide if I want to bite the bullet and do a $200 a month subscription to try it out. We'll see. I think from everything that I've seen, it does seem to be worth the investment. And then I think another thing that we just continue to watch is this prototyping and coding. It is just anyone can build an app now, thanks to the help of AI. And so I really think that's going to unleash a lot of creativity and innovation in places like politics, where you don't have to be a technical person to now be able to create software. So I mean, it's just crazy to keep up with. My recommendation continues to just be trying all the new things and see how it might help your work.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I use AI in my workflow here at Advocacy Content Kitchen and producing a lot of content, Eric. And I had to teach myself the word agentic, and then I had to come up with a metaphor to help myself understand it. But from what I have processed, from what you've taught us today, and what I've heard on this podcast before, is that it's about workflow. And agentic AI is not just a tool that's sitting here that I can use and bring things to it, but I can give it direction. It can go out into the world and start to seek information against goals or priorities that I have set. And in that way, it's like I'm going out there to do this research. Is that fair? Did I say that right?
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to think of it. Is of there's autonomy and reasoning, right? So previously, you could say, okay, I want you to go to this website and update this data every day, right? That was a very kind of static use case where it would automate. But now you say, hey, go out and find the best way to get to Portugal on February the 10th, and compare cost, right? Like, so you can give it, again, this natural language level instruction, and it goes out and executes the task and probably even pay for tickets for you. I mean, it's really cool how quickly this rolls out. And then it's just sort of like announced on a blog post, and then everyone has access to it. So the I can't imagine what it's like in terms of the disruption, and it's just going to just, we're seeing waves and waves of it, really. It is exciting, and unfortunately I have a full-time job, so I can't keep up with AI as much as I wish I could.
Well, when we focus this through the lens of politics and campaigns, is this just deep thinkers trying to imagine what the trends will be in this coming campaign cycle? Or do you think you have an idea about how our listeners should be considering this as a battlefront in campaigning?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've got to keep an eye on is sort of the regulation that's around AI, and the American Association of Political Consultants and groups like that are doing really good work to make sure that our perspective is heard. Another thing that's really interesting, we started to see this emerge a little bit at the end of 2024, as voters go to AI to get more information about policies, candidates, political parties, things like that. We now have to worry about the bias of those platforms. So, previously what we've seen researchers do is give it a test. Think about those quizzes that you've taken in the past of like which party best represents your ideology, and giving that to an AI. Well, that gives you kind of mixed results. But there's a recent study from the Manhattan Institute that I'll link to in the show notes that really caught my attention, and they offer a new way for assessing the bias of artificial intelligence. So they tried a different approach where they are looking at factors beyond just the how they respond to political questions, but what makes up their knowledge base, if you will. And it found that most of them lean left to varying degrees. So we now have to start thinking about what do the AI platforms say about our campaigns, our parties, our policies, and then thinking of strategies, just like we worry about search engine optimization. What comes
Yeah,
up when
I
you
was
Google something? Yeah.
I was just thinking about some of the shows that you've done over the years where you've cautioned What happens when voters are seeking information on voice search platforms, be it Alexa or Siri? And these are the kinds of answers that you want to know if you're a campaigner and account for or program for.
Yeah, and we don't really have a clear strategy for that yet. We just don't know. We don't have enough visibility into what gets into this training. How does it adopt information? So I think probably some general principles that we can continue is making sure that, if you're a think tank, for example, and you're putting out research about policies, you need to put that in a machine readable file. Just putting it on a PDF no longer acceptable, even though the AI can read PDFs. But putting this data in structured ways that AI can get to it, and then thinking about reverse engineering. What are the queries? What are the questions that people are going to ask, and structuring your content around that. That's directionally where I think this needs to go. I hope we're going to get some insights or some clarity into, particularly if we're going to see more political impact from this AI. Understanding where it gets its information from, right? So if it's only ingesting Daily Kos or MoveOn.org, that's problematic. We need to kind of see where the data is coming from, and how can we contribute to that conversation. And that's a whole new frontier that no one is even thinking about in our space.
I was going to add something, but if you want to close it down.
Um, yeah, and I think that this is. You add something.
Okay. You know what this sounds eerily like to me, Eric? The suspicious nature that any critical thinker should approach a poll with. What is the sample size? Who did the poll? When, how, and with what qualities was it conducted? All of this has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, it's a whole new set of skills for media literacy, and making sure that you have your grasp of the facts before relying on these tools. They can be good. I always say they're good co-pilots, but you don't want to put it on autopilot. So that is definitely something that people have to keep an eye on. Well, Adam, thanks for joining me on the show. It's good to have you in front of the microphone for a change. I'll link to our previous conversation in the show notes so people can learn more about you. And as I say every show, if this episode made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, all we ask is that you share it with a friend or colleague. You look good in the process. More people learn about the show. It's a win-win all around. Remember to subscribe to the Campaign Trend podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And you can visit our website at campaigntrend.com for even more. With that, I'll say thanks for listening. See you next time.